Hi, welcome to our show, Umbrellas of Hope. We are committed to enrich the life of members of the veteran and military community by connecting them to the resources that they need. We advocate for professional and entrepreneurial opportunities and facilitate conversations of hope, empowerment, and creativity to reduce military and civilian transition difficulties and to help our veteran and entrepreneurs families to thrive. Hi, I'm Niurka, your host. We invite you to be part of this journey as we, together, bring a positive change on new beginnings, opportunity, and success. Our new mini series will be introducing the art of business to share with you how it can enhance your life, your community, and your future. So stay tuned. Hi, welcome back. I have a question for you. How many times are we speaking and sometimes it seems like people are not listening? Does that happen to you? It happens to me sometimes. But today, Kurt Potter, a Navy veteran and keynote speaker, um, is here to actually share with us about communication barriers and strategies on how to overcome them. So please stay tuned for this very interesting topic.
Sure, and good morning, and thank you for having me on. So, as you can see from the pictures, as you said, I'm a military veteran. I also worked for the U.S. government for about 10 years, and I've been working in the oil and gas field for the last 10 years. But I'm not necessarily a rig hand, as my background's in public speaking, teaching, and coaching. On the rigs, I teach leadership, the continuous improvement process, as well as team resource management principles. I did over 20 years in the Navy, and I was very, very lucky. I went to a lot of good schools that helped me a great deal, to include the Defense Language Institute for Vietnamese and for Russian. I also stayed there for 3 years as a language instructor while I was in the military. And I was lucky enough to work for the Department of Defense as an interpreter during disarmament missions to the former Soviet Union. And I think that's where I'm probably going to share with you right now the story that got me deeply, deeply interested in communication. As I said, I went through a lot of good schools at tax dollars expense. So thank you very much. That's greatly appreciated. Um, During these missions, there was always about 10 of us, to include two interpreters and a team chief. So we went off to a missile elimination facility for about 3 weeks. And it's very slow paced and a lot of dialogue, a lot of interpreting. And at the end of all of those missions, we have a big reception, kind of a banquet dinner where we thank everybody for all of the good work, etc. Now, my team chief and I had sat down together the night before the dinner and gone over his comments. So he spoke English and I interpreted those into Russian, and it went very, very well. Well, about 5 days, a week later, we went to another mission, and it was a quota inspection. Those are 24 hours, very intense, because rather than eliminating a piece of treaty limited item, a launcher or whatever, you're looking to see if the other side's cheating. So the side that's being inspected is very, very guarded. Well, we did our 24 hours and we noticed that the Soviets were taking a lot of pictures of us, very, very many pictures. And of course, again, it's the Cold War, so we're suspicious. At the end of the work, it's very rushed, time's very compressed. And I asked my team chief, hey, do we want to practice your remarks? He said, nah, you did so good last time, just wing it. And so we went ahead and did it, and it kind of went okay. Now, remember, this is a room full of about 100 people, uh, just listening to these remarks, including about 75 Soviet officers at the rank of major and above. And it went okay. But then the Soviets brought out the pictures that they had taken of us. And that's the reason they were taking it, was harmless. They wanted to give us a nice montage or a collection of all these pictures. And my team chief looked at them and he said, man, these are beautiful. These are wonderful. We'll treasure them forever. And I got out, these are wonderful. These are beautiful. And I just froze on the word treasure. And I'm thinking, oh, man, I know the noun for treasure, but what's the verb? So I'm freezing. I'm freezing. I have this deer in the headlight look probably. And I blurted out, these are beautiful. These are wonderful. We will love them forever. And all of the Soviets kind of laughed, and you know, I thought to myself, that didn't work out too well. So afterwards, the Soviet interpreter Sergei came up to me and he said, Kurt, you're a very wonderful interpreter. That was a good job, excellent. But I can tell you had a problem with the word treasure. Yes, you should understand that in Russian, just like in English, treasure has many different meanings, and including to love, right? You use love. Well, that has meanings too, to include physical. Unfortunately for you, you picked the physical one. Not a nice picture for us. Sorry. Better luck next time. So, of course, I was really embarrassed and said, I'm never going to do this again. And it goes back to the philosophy that I set for myself, that I always want to be prepared no matter what. That, you just got to work on it. You've got to ensure that you have your vocabulary down. You work on your tangibles and your intangibles, but you can never forget. Sooner or later, there's going to be some kind of low, and it's okay. Just get your lesson learned and bounce back from it. So that was when I really, really got very interested in making sure that I could do the best that I could whenever I have to deliver some type of message. So let's chat real quick about team resource management principles. I've got communication there as the top one because I think communication applies and interacts with every single one of those: situational awareness, decision making. Leadership, of course, has to emphasize communication. Teamwork, without good communication, we will never have successful teamwork. And then human factors: complacency, fatigue, irritation. All of those things can affect our communication, and we have to be aware of them. All right, so we're going to chat a little bit about communication breakdowns and strategies to overcome them. First off, what is communication? Niurka, could you help me with this, please? How do you define communication, or anyone in the audience? What is communication?
It's the way that we talk to each other, the way that we um, build relationships, right? We break barriers.
All right, so the way we talk to each other, the way we relate to each other, the way we build relationships. And I like the way we build relationships because, as you know, John Maxwell always says, everyone communicates, but few connect. And if we're going to build those relationships, obviously we have to be connecting. Now, it's just not the way we talk to each other, right? There's various types of communication.
Right.
Would you please be so kind as to list a few types of communication, or maybe somebody in the audience can throw something in?
I think one of the ways, besides talking, we communicate by signs. We communicate by touching, by touch, um, and other ways to communicate.
Yes.
I think touch is such important. We communicate so much with it. Um,
Actually, I kind of like the touch because it's not one that people think about a lot. Um, and you said use signs or gestures, right? So we've got verbal communication, obviously, which is one that everybody responds with fairly quickly. Uh, Other types of communication. Look at this gentleman. How many different messages are we here just by a facial gesture?
that's a big one.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. You've got sadness, you've got a little bit of confusion, somebody not quite sure, and then somebody that's really happy. I mean, the same person, not saying a word, but four different messages. So nonverbal, right?
no, bro.
And I like the fact that you brought up signals. I'm a big diver. I love diving, and obviously, whether you're diving on a reef or you're diving in one of the caves on the Mayan Riviera in Mexico, you're not going to talk to each other under the water. So we communicate via gestures, and gestures are also very, very important in any type of communication. Uh, Sometimes we overuse them when we're communicating. For me, I like making sure that my gestures emphasize my point. Firstly, secondly, thirdly, etc. We don't
Okay.
want them to be a distraction. All right, communication barriers. Can you think of any communication barriers?
Oh, there's so many distractions. We can be talking on ear off and people don't listen to what we're saying, a word of it. Um, it can be the dog barking in the background and the person that's hearing you get distracted. It can be the TV in the background. Um, or maybe they're thinking about something while you're talking. Um, there's so many communication. I think it's what 65% that they don't really hear you.
Uh,
Uh,
ab- ab- Absolutely, because and we're going to talk about that a little bit, passive versus active listening. But let's highlight on a few barriers. The big one that I liked the two that you said were some kind of distraction, right? Or we're just distracted.
right.
Language obviously is a big barrier. I'm working right now on an oil rig south of San Antonio, right at this moment. And we have some language barriers because a lot of the hands that are working here right now are Hispanic. And so there's guys who are fully bilingual. There's guys that are partially bilingual. They have a really good understanding of English. And there's a couple guys that just speak only their native tongue. So we're having to overcome that using those guys that are fully bilingual to help us out with the translation. But when we say language, it's also not just whether it's Spanish versus English versus Russian versus Thai. You go to frame of reference next, right? We all come from different backgrounds, different countries, different locations within a state, and we don't always see the world the
The
same
accent.
way. Accents, absolutely. Uh, and also jargon. Let's talk about emotions. Uh, we always have to make sure that when we're delivering our message that we're doing that via a logical, well thought out process and we've prepared. If we're angry, if we're frustrated, if we're upset, that can definitely cloud our message and we're not going to get our point across. And then there's the big pink one, right, that you brought up, distractions. We got to make sure that there are no interruptions whatsoever while we're trying to get our message across.
Yes.
Um, Now, with this one, I've got language and culture. I normally show a movie with this, but in order to save time, I've deleted the movies. So if you see the headline there, she speaks good American. This is a movie I found on YouTube, and it's obviously a young lady that's just doing parodies, and it's very funny. And she's explaining her conversation with a young British teenager. And she says, "Yeah, there's a bit of a language barrier because he's in England and I speak American." She was just hilarious. But one of the things that she used to highlight that was he said, "Yeah, I asked him how much it cost, and he told me it was 15 pounds." Again, there's a language barrier because I asked him how much it cost, but he told me how much it weighed. So we always have to be aware of the jargon, the slang, or the terminology that people use in other places, even if they're speaking English. I mean, obviously, pounds for Americans is weight, but for the English, it's money. So she just didn't get that. All right, you spoke about distractions. On this slide, you can see a pretty big meeting here, right?
Yes.
All right, so do you see the truck in the background, that big red cab right there?
Oh yeah, that
Um,
makes a lot of noise.
yeah. What's funny is this is a very important meeting. A lot of people here, and the truck is on, and we're all speaking very, very loudly, trying to talk over the truck. A lot of experienced people, a lot of people that have extensive public speaking experience too. And we're speaking louder and louder. And finally, a young man that wasn't involved in the meeting because he wasn't going to participate in that job kind of came out, looked at us, and he laughed and he walked over and he turned off the truck. And we just like kind of all looked around, laughed at each other, and we're, well, why didn't we think of that? So again, we should always be aware of our surroundings or any distractions that could affect our our communication, and therefore our message, and make sure that we get rid of them in advance if we can. All
Yeah,
right,
and it,
uh, go ahead.
yeah, it comes like when you turn off the noise and you hear that you are being screaming the whole time, and you think because
Yeah,
you are trying to overcome that noise in the background.
and the easiest thing would have been just to turn off the truck.
All
All
right.
right, passive versus active listening, and this is another movie that went aside in order to save time. But you'd mentioned already passive versus acting a little bit earlier. What's your definition of active listening?
Active listening when actually people are listening, are actually understanding what you're saying, and they're engaged in the conversation, and you can see that they get it, they get what's happening. Um, yeah, that's what I believe is active
Yeah,
listening.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think your key word there was participating. Participating. If somebody's just sitting there, the recipient of the message, and just kind of nodding their head, we're not really sure if they're actually listening to what we're saying. They may be hearing us, but they may not be listening. So, frame of reference. We all see the world differently. Again, whether we're in Thailand or whether we're in Japan or whether we're from East Texas versus West Texas or California versus Colorado, we all grow up differently with different values, different norms. What do you see right here, Niurka? What do you see in this picture?
Well, I see a column, but then I see two faces.
Okay, good, good. A lot of people, I mean, it's going to be 50-50. Some people see a vase, right, or a vase, however you want to pronounce it,
Yeah.
coming up from the bottom and expanding out. And the other people see two faces. I showed this to my wife and I said, "What do you see?" And all I saw was the vase. So I wanted to see if she saw the vase too. That's where I thought it was going. She said, "I see two faces." I said, "What? What two faces?" She said, "You don't see them?" I said, "No." And she goes, "You've got to go ahead and go around and take a look at the white versus the black. And there's, one face looking at the other and two noses." And then it kind of opened my eyes and I saw it. So we can't forget a frame of reference. Just because we're hearing the same thing doesn't mean we understand the message the same way based on where we're from and our jargon again and our values and how we grow up and how we look at the world, our education, our training. All right, let's talk about accountability. So when we have this communication, right, we are making sure that there's a transmitter and a receiver because that's what communication is, the transfer or receipt of information. Now, accountability as far as the transmitter. You've got to be clear. If you are not clear, if there's not clarity, your message is going to get lost. You certainly don't want to engage in a lot of blah, 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 blah. And making sure that you are pronouncing everything clearly. But more importantly, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end to your message. That's what you're looking for when you're talking about clarity. Concise. You want your message to be short and sweet. And then confirm. We always have to confirm understanding. How do you confirm understanding when you're trying to get a very important message across?
You ask a question. You ask, make sure that they understood uh, what you were talking about. I remember when I was in the military, they always tell us to repeat the same message three times because we had three different kinds of listeners. Um, and sometimes we had to make them repeat the question and tell us the message back to us, or and there's somebody that actively listening and they get on the first time.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I like the fact that you're having them repeat it back. That's the main thing. We have to make sure that we ask open-ended questions, and that can either be a repetition or it can be a direct answer to your question as to how they understand it. We always have to avoid the "you understand, right?" and somebody nods their head or says yes. If they say they understand, you cannot be 100% sure as the transmitter that they really understood your message, can you?
Right. Especially
Yeah,
that this
yeah.
you
All you know is they've said yes. So you go ahead and say, what is your role? What is your hazard? What are your mitigations? How are you going to do this job? Or as you brought up, please repeat back to me. This is how we really confirm. Uh, I'd like to share a little story here from another different oil rig I was on. I came in and I was doing a presentation on communication, just a real quick one. And I said, gentlemen, how do we confirm understanding? And a young man from Alabama, Pork Chop was his nickname, says, well, that's easy, Mr. Kurt. You have to ask open ended questions. And I'm giving a high five. Everybody's going, great job, Pork Chop. And the Canadian rig manager says, I'm not so impressed, Pork Chop. What's an open ended question? And Pork Chop says, heck if I know. All I know is it's the right answer. Which got also got a good laugh. Which he got a good laugh in the room too. And he was right. And then we explained that what it is. So clear, concise, and you have to confirm. That is your responsibility. That's how you are accountable as a transmitter. All right. Receiver also has accountability. Listen actively. We're not drifting. We're not thinking about the beach. We're not thinking about the honey-do list. And we always seek clarification. We, as business people, as office managers, whatever field we're in, we have to make sure that we create an atmosphere where everybody knows that it is okay to ask questions if you don't understand. There is no shame in that. Uh, my mother always told me when I was growing up, the only stupid question is the one that doesn't get asked. And to this day, I believe that 100%.
exactly. I believe that as well.
Absolutely. All right. So absolutely. All right. So let's talk about a few public speaking tips. I use this acronym VEGA. I got this from the Navy, stole it, 1988, when I went through instructor training school, about a month in San Diego. It was a great, great course, wonderful, wonderful training. So, VEGA, our voice. What are some important things about our voice that we have to ensure we do when we're speaking in public? What do you think?
We have to make sure that we pronounce the words correctly. Um,
All right.
that we use the proper pitch and
Yes.
and the put the emphasis on the words that you want them to make sure that they pay attention to, and kind of set the tone with your pitch as well.
Perfect, perfect. The only other thing that I would just add is perhaps project. A lot of times we don't project very well because we're a little bit nervous. But whether it's 10 people in the room or 50 or 100, you've got to make sure that that voice gets out there because we don't always have a microphone. And I loved your thoughts about pitch and tone. We're always going to make sure that we're not talking in a monotone and sitting here just talking about this because we could have a really important message. But if you talk like this with no energy, people just aren't going to care. I,
No.
you've got you've got to bring the enthusiasm. You've got to bring the energy. Otherwise, if you don't, why should they care? All
Right.
right. We're going to now talk about eye contact. Why is eye contact important?
Because people get seen. They like to be seen. So maintaining eye contact while you're speaking, um, they pay attention more actively as well because they feel like they're being engaged.
Yes, and perfect. I love that you ended up with engaged because that's also part of this E. If you don't have a dialogue going in your meeting or on your talk, people are going to switch from active listening to passive listening. So you've got to make sure that you are actively engaging your audience, whether it's three or whether it's 25 people. It has to be a dialogue. It cannot be a monologue, which is why I want to say thank you again for participating with me in this as we go through this. The only thing I would emphasize also about eye contact is watch out for what I call the friendly face syndrome. We all like positive vibes. We like positive feedback. You've got to make sure if you see someone in your audience that they're sort of really active listening, looking at you, nodding their head, smiling. You don't find yourself talking just to them, and perhaps you're doing this subconsciously. If you do find yourself focusing on one person, what do you think is happening with the other people?
They feel left out.
They feel left out and they'll disengage and they're back to passive listening, aren't they?
Yes.
All right, gestures. They're very important. We're going to keep them to a minimum, but we're going to use them to emphasize our points. But we don't want to get making so many gestures, going back and forth and getting caught up in those gestures that the audience is now concentrating on our gestures, vice the overall or the total message. The other thing that I would emphasize is watch out for ticks, where you have a pen and you're nervous and you're clicking it. Very, very, that's very distracting. Watch out for verbal ticks, the repetitions of a lot of words. Having said that, having said that, having said that, we have to watch out for all of these things as part of our presentation. And the last one is a attitude. For me, when you're giving a talk, a presentation, even a little toolbox talk, a pre-job safety meeting before you go to work, you always have to go ahead and plan out your remarks. You prepare your remarks. You practice your speech, and then you go ahead and you perform. If you follow those four P's, plan, practice, right? And then you go ahead and you plan, you prepare, you practice, and you perform, you're going to go ahead and be much better off getting your message across. This is one of my favorites. The number one criteria for advancement, right, for all professionals is the ability to communicate effectively. And I have to stress again, without successful or effective, highly effective communication, we won't have successful teamwork. And that's important in any profession where teamwork is paramount. All right. Now, failure to communicate. We really want to avoid this. I'm going to go ahead and date myself here. There's a wonderful movie with Paul Newman and Rod Steiger, Cool Hand Luke. And in the movie, Paul Newman is a convict, and they're on a work party. And Rod Steiger goes ahead and takes his little whip there and knocks him into the hole, and he rolls down the hill. And Rod Steiger, who's the warden, looks at all the other convicts and says, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." And I would suggest to you and to the people in our audience that if we think about our accountability as a transmitter, if we think about our accountability as a receiver, and if we use the Vega tips, especially the four P's, the plan, prepare, practice, and perform, we will avoid communication failures. Uh, this goes back to your remark. Not only do we want to communicate, but we want to connect, because without a good connection, we're not going to build those relationships, which are very, very important to highly successful communication.
Wow, the art communication, such an important topic. Do you know we actually communicate 70% of our time? But are we actually listening? We might be hearing, but are we listening? That's a skill that we had to really had to practice. Like Kurt mentioned, there's so many barriers that can get in the middle of or what we're trying to say. Noise in the background, accents like mine. Um, and don't worry, I've been practicing and training of the last 30 years to make it better. So anytime now, it will get better. Promise. But all those little things, we hear a word and we go down the rabbit hole because it kind of make us remember something and we stop listening or we get distracted because somebody else is uh, not saying it the perfect way. There's so many nuances that can get in the way of our message. So we have to be conscious about it. And we have to practice ourselves to be better listener. Because it's very important. We might miss very important cues. Look at divers. If they can see the signals, what can happen to them? They can miss danger signs. They can run out of oxygen, and they can get in serious trouble. What about soldiers in the field? You cannot be giving away your position. You have to talk by signs. What about people that cannot talk and they have to communicate by touch? Or some cultures that talk by touch. I'm from a Cuba background. We're very touchy. We talk with our hands, talks loud, our tone is loud. They talk all at the same time. So you come from a different background, you might be like, what's going on? Uh, and they just excited. They just want to be here all at the same time. You know, people from other cultural backgrounds might be a little bit different. They might be uh, more quiet. Uh, they might be very polite, like people from the South. I really like that. From New York, they're very direct, and they have this distinctive accent, right? And those are all those nuances that can get in the way of the communication, believe it or not. So how do we practice active listening? What are all those strategies that Core share are you going to put into practice today? Let us know. Umbrellas of Hope. Share with us. I can't wait to hear. Bye.
Where all the great ideas get brewed.
You have and will continue to enjoy this journey in creativity with us. In today's world, where artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, advancing science, and autonomous vehicles is our new normal, creativity has never been more important. This new mini-series of Umbrellas of Hope was created in order to inspire you and empower you by giving you the creative confidence to redesign the world around you, to create new solutions that are invaluable for today's society, powered by your vision, your own unique talents, and limited only by your imagination. Our world, our society, our future needs you.